Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
During dinner, my husband spilled hot soup on me when I refused to give his mother my bank card and declared, "You'll give her the card today, or pack your stuff and get out." I left. And when he came by with my mother-in-law the next morning, he was nearly stunned by what he saw. The soup burned instantly. I didn't even have time to register what had happened, only felt the hot liquid running down my chest, soaking into my blouse, searing my skin. I jumped up reflexively, brushing away the drops of borscht, his words ringing in my ears. "You'll give her the card today, or pack your stuff and get out." Miguel stood over me. Large, heavy-set, face flushed with anger. There was something in his eyes that sent a chill down my spine. 23 years of marriage, and for the first time, I was truly afraid of my own husband. "Miguel, what are you doing?" I managed to choke out, pressing a soaked napkin to my chest. "What are you doing?" He mocked. "My mother asks for help and you start acting up." Luisa, his mother, sat across from me with her thin lips pursed. Her cold gaze slid over me, and I could have sworn there was a satisfied smirk at the corners of her mouth. "Gloria," she said with that honeyed voice I hated with every fiber of my being. "Is it really so hard to help an old woman? Her pension isn't enough. You know how expensive things are now. And medicine costs a fortune." I silently left the table and went into the bathroom, locking the door, a thing I had never done before. I took off my blouse and held my reddened skin under cool water. My reflection stared back at me in the mirror, confused, tears frozen in my eyes. What am I doing? How did I let it get this far? I asked myself. Miguel and I had met back in '91, when the world around us was collapsing, but we were young and believed we could face any hardship together. He worked at a factory. I had just finished my degree in literature and dreamed of becoming a writer. I remember how he admired my stories, told me I had talent. When did that change? When did I stop being a beloved wife and become a voiceless ATM for his mother? When did I learn to stay silent, to adapt, to fear his disapproval? Heavy footsteps sounded behind the door. "Gloria, stop being dramatic," Miguel's voice was muffled. "Come out, let's talk like adults." Like adults? I gave a bitter laugh. When your husband dumps soup on you and then wants to talk like adults, it's no longer a marriage, it's a farce. I remembered my conversation yesterday with Susanna, my college friend. We hadn't seen each other in almost 2 years. Miguel thought she was a bad influence, and I gave in, like always. Susanna had called out of the blue, having found my new number by chance. "Are you okay?" she asked after a few minutes. "Of course," I replied out of habit. "Come on, Gloria, I've known you since our first year. What's going on?" And then I broke down sobbing over the phone for the first time in years, spilling everything I had bottled up, how Miguel controlled all the money, humiliated me in public, how I was afraid to even speak for fear of making him angry. "Remember how we used to dream of writing books?" Susanna asked. "Well, I wrote 2 mystery novellas and published them myself. What about you? Have you written even a single line these past years?" I was silent, and that silence said more than words. "You know, I ended up alone," Susanna continued. "Kolya left for a younger woman, we split the apartment. I thought my life was over. And now? Now I realize it's only just begun, without fear, on my own terms." There was another knock, more insistent. "Gloria, your little tantrum isn't impressing anyone. Come out, now." I looked at my blouse, stained with dark patches of borscht. Just like my life, ruined and stained. And suddenly, I felt a strange clarity. "You'll give her the card today, or pack your stuff and get out." "Fine, Miguel, you gave me a choice. For the first time in years, I'll make it myself." I opened the door and walked past him in silence. He stared after me, confused, clearly not expecting this. "Where are you going?" "To pack my stuff," I replied simply. Miguel laughed. "More of your cheap dramas, Gloria." cut it out and set the table for tea. But I was already pulling down an old suitcase from the top shelf, the same one I brought with me to the capital when I came to attend university. It was worn, faded, just like my life with this man. 23 years I told myself to endure for the sake of the family. That everyone has problems. That if he hits, he loves, just like my own mother said. For 23 years, I silenced my desires, my goals, my dreams. I betrayed myself for a man who just dumped hot soup on me over a bank card. That was the last straw, and it was soup. I packed my things, my hands trembling, not with fear, but with a strange, unfamiliar feeling that was part despair, part liberation. In the bedroom, the only sound was the old clock ticking away the minutes of my former life. Tick-tock, tick-tock. 23 years in this house. 23 years. And what can I truly call my own? Miguel stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame. His heavy body nearly filled the space. Once, as a student, I used to admire those broad shoulders, the strong arms of a machinist. Reliable, my friend said. You'll be safe with him, my mother assured me. Are you serious? His voice was laced with irritation, not concern. You're really going to throw a tantrum over this nonsense? I kept packing silently, blouses, skirts, dresses. How few nice things I really had. Mostly plain, modest clothes. When did I stop dressing up? When did I start scrimping on myself, yet giving money without complaint for another TV for Louisa? Mom's right, Miguel went on, seeing I wasn't replying. You've gotten too full of yourself. Forgot who took you out of your village, gave you a roof over your head. And now look at you, acting like some damn princess. I froze, holding my only good dress, navy blue, with a collar, bought 5 years ago for Miguel's 40th birthday, and carefully smoothed an imaginary wrinkle. Out of the village? I asked quietly. We met in the university library. I was in my 3rd year. You were working and studying part-time. I lived in the dorm, not a village. And when we got married, we lived the first 3 years in a room I got through the school where I worked. Here we go again, he rolled his eyes theatrically. You always have to sort everything out, prove you're right. Behind him, Louisa appeared. Her face twisted with righteous indignation. Miguel, don't lower yourself. If your wife values her card more than her family, let her go. You'll find a decent woman without all the drama. She talked about me in the 3rd person, like I wasn't even there. She always had. For 23 years, I was never a person to her. Just a function. A daughter-in-law. A maid. A source of money. Louisa, I said, folding my clothes. I've never refused to help you. Miguel and I bought you furniture, appliances, medicine. I took you to the sanatorium last summer on my own vacation time. So what? Am I supposed to worship you now? She scoffed. That's your duty as a wife, to help your husband's mother. That's how it's always been. I zipped the suitcase, then opened the top drawer of the dresser and took out a box with my few pieces of jewelry, grandmother's amethyst earrings, my mother's wedding ring, an amber brooch bought on our only beach vacation, a gold chain Miguel gave me for our 10th anniversary. Bought yourself trinkets with my money and now you're taking them with you? Miguel hissed. It was so unjust, I could barely breathe. I had worked all these years, first as a teacher, then the last 5 years in a library, and also as a proofreader. My modest salary always went to our shared budget, which he controlled. My documents, I said suddenly. I need my passport and work record book. What a burden you turned out to be, Miguel muttered, but went to the cabinet where we kept our papers. I sat on the edge of the bed. My legs felt weak. Where was I going? What would I do? I had almost no money, just $100 emergency stash hidden in a Bradbury novel. Where would I live? Zuzana. I had to call Zuzana. Miguel returned and tossed my passport onto the bed. Couldn't find your work record. Liar. I knew all the documents were together. He was keeping it on purpose, so I couldn't get another job. So I'd come back. Give it to me, please, I said calmly. I'll need it. I don't give a damn about your whining, Miguel barked, and I flinched. Try surviving without me first, then you can talk about rights. Just like in the 90s, when I got laid off from school and he worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. He never let me forget it. Even though later, when I got a job at the library, I supported him for 8 months while the factory didn't pay salaries. But that, he chose to forget. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts. Zuzana's number, saved just yesterday, lit up the screen. I turned toward the window and pressed call. Hello? Her voice sounded surprised. It was almost 11 p.m. Zuzana, it's me. Gloria, my voice shook. I'm leaving Miguel. Can I stay with you? Just for a day or two, until I figure something out. Miguel scoffed when he heard. Luisa hissed something under her breath. Gloria, what happened? Zuzana asked, alarmed. Miguel poured hot soup on me because I wouldn't give his mom money. Silence. Then she said, calmly and firmly, Do you remember my address? Come. I'll be waiting. I'll leave the keys with the doorman if I have to. Thank you, I whispered. I remember. I'll be there soon. I hung up and met Miguel's gaze. His eyes were full of rage and disbelief. Done playing the victim? Off to cry to your divorced friend now? Go ahead, sleep on her couch. You'll last 3 days, tops. Luisa stepped in close, glaring up at me. Tiny, brittle, but filled with a venom that made her feel bigger than she was. Good, she hissed. Miguel thought he'd found himself an educated woman, and look how she turned out. Think you're irreplaceable? Women like you are a dime a dozen. Wandering the streets with their diplomas, expecting special treatment. I buttoned my old coat and picked up my suitcase. It felt surprisingly light. My entire life from the last 23 years fit inside this battered bag. I'll come by later for the rest of my things and documents, I said, surprised by how calm I sounded. Like hell you will, Miguel blocked the door. You're gone. That's it. Nothing here's yours anymore. Miguel, I looked him in the eye, don't do this. I have manuscripts, photos of my parents. These are personal things. Manuscripts, he laughed. Those scraps you scribble at night? So that's what you're doing when you say you're working? Some failed writer, huh? He didn't know. All these years, he never knew I kept writing. In secret, at night, hiding pages among accounting files, stories, drafts, journals. The only thing truly mine. I never showed him anything again after the first time he read one and said, What nonsense. Go cook a proper dinner instead. Let me through, please, I said quietly. He stepped aside. Not out of respect, he was just sure I'd be back. Where else would I go? No money, no home, no job. I left the apartment I had lived in for 23 years and went down the stairs, avoiding the elevator. Miguel and I used to kiss in that elevator, like teenagers, after the New Year concert in '92. It felt like another life, with different people. It was drizzling outside. I flagged a taxi. An indulgence I couldn't afford, but I didn't care. Today, my old life was falling apart. That meant a new one had to begin. Nietzsche Street, number 6, I told the driver, leaning back in the seat, watching the lights of the night city drift by, suddenly so unfamiliar and strange. Zuzana's apartment greeted me with the smell of coffee and fresh pastries. As if it knew I was coming and had been preparing. As if it had been waiting for me all these years. My God, Gloria. She gasped when she saw the stains on my blouse, visible even through my coat. He nearly boiled you alive. Zuzana had barely changed since our university days. The same curly dark hair, now graced with a noble silver streak, the same radiant eyes and quick gestures. Only the wrinkles at the corners of her eyes hinted at the passing years. She hugged me, and I felt something inside me break. The familiar shell I had built over the years, my armor against pain, ridicule, and humiliation. I burst into tears on her shoulder, helpless and desperate like a little girl. There, it's okay, Susanna gently stroked my back. You did the right thing by leaving. You hear me? You did the right thing. I didn't feel like I had done the right thing. I felt old, lost, unwanted, thrown out of a life I once called mine. And yet, strangely enough, deep inside, a faint spark flickered, something I hadn't felt in years. A small, barely noticeable flame of hope. Come on, Susanna led me into the room. I made up the living room for you. Drop your suitcase and come to the kitchen. I bet you haven't had a proper dinner. Her small 2-room apartment was so cozy, so Susanna. Bookshelves from floor to ceiling, paintings on the walls, funny ceramic figurines on the dresser. No crystal, no fancy china sets like the ones Miguel and I collected for years for guests, while we drank from chipped mugs. The kitchen table was set, steaming coffee cups, a dish with cottage cheese casserole, a little bowl of jam. Eat, Susanna pushed a plate toward me. And tell me everything, from the beginning. I picked up the fork, but the food wouldn't go down. I don't even know where to start, I admitted. Start from the last time we saw each other, Susanna suggested, sitting across from me. Remember Florence's birthday? I did. 2 years ago, at the birthday party of our mutual college friend. Miguel had come with me, kept his hand on my knee the entire time. To others it looked caring, but I knew better, it was about control. After that visit, he threw a tantrum. Apparently, I had talked too cheerfully with Florence's brother. Acting like a little girl when you're nearly 50. Pathetic. I began telling the story, haltingly at first, with pauses, then more and more immersed in the bitter memories of how Miguel had gradually cut me off from friends and even from my own family. My mother died 5 years ago, and I couldn't go to the funeral because there's no money for your little trips. I talked about how every step I took was monitored, every penny counted. He took my bank card, I said, turning the cup of cold coffee in my hands, said I didn't know how to manage money, spent it on nonsense. So he'd give me allowances. Can you imagine? Like a kid, pocket money. And I still bought groceries, clothes, household stuff with my own salary. And then he'd scold me for buying the wrong meat, the wrong vegetables. Susanna listened silently, occasionally shaking her head or pressing her lips together. But the worst part, I continued, was how he kept reminding me I owed him. That without him, I was nobody. A hillbilly. A poor schoolteacher. And he elevated me, gave me a roof over my head, dressed me, fed me. What nonsense! Susanna snorted. You were always 3 times smarter than him. More educated, more talented. But he worked when everything fell apart, I said quietly. He really did save us back then. And I. And what? You didn't work? Susanna cut in. You worked like a horse. First at school, then at the library. And everything at home was on you. And his ever-complaining mother. Gloria, stop blaming yourself. I fell silent. For the first time in years, someone was telling me that I wasn't at fault, that I didn't have to spend the rest of my life repaying my husband for working during the recession. I stopped writing, I confessed, and that was the hardest thing to admit. I mean, I still wrote in secret, but just little fragments, sketches. Nothing serious. I forgot what it was like to create something entirely my own. Susanna stood up, walked to a shelf, and pulled out a softcover book. Look, she placed it in front of me. The Shadow of the Old Lilac, by Susanna Monzon. This is your book? I couldn't believe my eyes. You really published a book? Already on my second one, she said proudly. The first one actually sold, can you imagine? Small print run, of course, but still. And now I'm working on the third. Mysteries with a touch of the supernatural. Not Dunzova, obviously, but readers like them. I flipped through the pages, inhaling the scent of printer's ink, and felt something stir inside. Envy? No, admiration. And a sharp, aching sense of loss. How many stories that could have come from my pen remained unwritten? After the divorce, it was rough, Susanna went on, refilling my cup. Kolya left, took everything he could. I had to trade the apartment and start over at 45. Not exactly a party. I worked 2 jobs. Proofreader by day at a newspaper, creative writing group leader for seniors in the evening. Money was tight, I had to scrimp on everything. How did you manage? I asked, amazed by her resilience. Little by little, she smiled. First there were a lot of tears and fear. Then came anger. A good, healthy anger at the world and especially at Miguel. And then I realized that for the first time in 20 years, I was free. I could do what I wanted, write what I wanted, meet whoever I wanted. No explanations owed to anyone. She laughed, and there was no bitterness in her laugh. Only joy, the joy of liberation. I started writing my first mystery as therapy. The main character is a woman my age, recently divorced. And the funniest part? I killed off a character based on Miguel in the most creative way possible. A little literary revenge. I couldn't help smiling, imagining Susanna gleefully dispatching her ex on the pages of her novel. And the publisher? How did you find a publisher? First, I self-published. Small run. Gave copies to friends, took some to libraries. Then a reader recommended it to her daughter who works at a publishing house. They got interested and offered a contract for the second book. Not a big name like Penguin or anything, small print run, symbolic royalties, but still. A real publisher. Susanna spoke with such passion that I suddenly realized, when was the last time I saw someone this sincerely happy, this proud of their own achievements? You know. I write sometimes too, I admitted quietly. Stories, little life sketches. Nothing special. Will you show me? Susanna perked up instantly. I shook my head. They're still at home, in an old folder, in the closet. And my employment book is there too. Miguel never gave it back to me. Susanna's smile faded. That's bad, she frowned. It'll be hard to get a job without it. Though you know, some places now accept copies, if you explain the situation. And all my photos are there, letters from my parents, manuscripts. I suddenly realized how much I had left in that house. Not just things, pieces of myself. Don't worry, Susanna squeezed my hand. We'll get them. If you can't go, I'll go. Or we'll call the police. He has no right to keep your documents. I imagined the police showing up at his apartment now. Neighbors peeking through their doors, whispering. Did you hear? His wife ran away. Now she's back with the cops to grab her stuff. People will talk, I began. Let them talk, Susanna cut in. Gloria, wake up. What does it matter what the neighbors say? What matters is that you got out, that you're alive, that you have a future. She was right, of course. But years of habit, worrying about what others think, about saving face, about what people would say, don't just disappear overnight. Tomorrow we'll think about your work papers and your things, Susanna continued. Right now you need to rest. Have another coffee and go to bed. You've had a tough day. I nodded, feeling the exhaustion wash over me. The warmth of Susanna's kitchen, the smell of coffee, and her genuine care lulled me, melted away the tension that had built up over the years. Do you think I can start over? I asked as I got up from the table. At my age, with no money, no job, no place of my own? I did, Susanna replied simply. So you can too. You're stronger than you think, Gloria. You always were. I lay down on the pull-out sofa in the living room and covered myself with a soft blanket. The walls were covered in wallpaper with a tiny floral print, completely different from the severe stripes Miguel insisted on in our apartment. No frills, no flowers. We don't live in the countryside, he used to say. But I always liked flowers. Before bed, I checked my phone for messages. 5 missed calls from Miguel, 3 voice messages. I didn't listen to them. I knew what they said. First threats, then pleas to come back, then threats again. I muted the phone and slipped it under my pillow. Outside, the night city murmured. A dog barked somewhere, a few cars passed by. I lay there with my eyes open, replaying the day. How he threw soup on me, the fury in his eyes, the threats, the humiliation. For the first time, I saw our life clearly, like a veil had been lifted. And yet, I used to excuse him. His job is hard. He's stressed about the loan. He's just tired. It's so easy to find excuses for an abuser. Much harder to admit that you're not loved, that you're being used, that you're not a person but a function. How could I have lived like that? How did I endure it for 23 years? I asked myself in the dark, but found no answer. Just before dawn, I dreamed of my mother. She was sitting in the kitchen of our old country house, sorting blueberries and smiling at me. Gloria, you were always the smartest, the most capable. Study well, my dear, so you can have a happy life. She believed education would save me from the hard fate of a village woman. And what happened? I graduated with honors, moved to the city, and became a servant to a domineering husband and his mother. The morning was gray, but with a strange kind of light. I woke up to the smell of fresh pastries. Susanna was already bustling around the kitchen, whistling a tune from our youth. I think it was We Are the Echo, the long echo of each other. That song from the movie we all watched every New Year's Eve, like everyone in the Soviet Union. I lay there, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, filled with a strange feeling. As if I had gone back to my youth, when everything seemed possible, when the future was bright and full of promise. Before Miguel, before marriage, before the dull existence I had mistakenly called a life. Awake? Susanna peeked into the room, drying her hands on a dish towel. Good morning. How did you sleep in the new place? Strange, I admitted, sitting up. I had really vivid dreams. My mom appeared. That's good, Susanna nodded. It means she's with you, supporting you. I never believed in the supernatural, in signs, in the afterlife. But right then, the thought that my mom was somewhere out there, approving of my escape from the prison of an unhappy marriage, somehow warmed my heart. Breakfast is on the table, Susanna said. I'm heading to the shower. We'll talk about plans afterward. Plans? I hadn't had plans in years. Just routine, work, home, cooking, cleaning, then work again. Miguel made all the decisions for both of us. We're going to Javier's country house. We're taking a loan for renovations. We're not going on vacation this year. I couldn't even remember the last time I made a decision for myself. In the kitchen, there were fresh cinnamon rolls, coffee, and cottage cheese with sour cream. Just like when I was a child and my mother treated me to that simple delight on weekends. I spread some butter on a roll, took a bite, and nearly cried from the rush of memories. Susanna came back quickly, her wet hair wrapped in a towel, fresh and full of energy. So, Gloria, let's think. She sat across from me, pouring herself some coffee. First, we need to get your documents and personal things back. You can't do anything without them. I winced at the thought of facing Miguel again. He won't give them back, I said quietly. You don't know him. He's changed over the years. He's become harder, meaner. Then we won't ask, Susanna squinted slyly. I know a local police officer, Zacharia. Good guy, helped me when Kolia tried to take stuff from the apartment after the divorce. We'll call him, explain the situation, and go to Miguel with him. With the police? I looked at her in alarm. No, Susanna, that's too much. Too much is when your husband dumps hot soup on you, Susanna said firmly. Asserting your legal right to your documents and belongings, that's normal. By the way, when you said manuscripts, what exactly did you mean? I blushed, as if it was something shameful. Just stories, journals, drafts of a novel I never finished. A lot? Zuzana asked matter-of-factly. A whole box. I hid them on the top shelf in an old shoebox from my winter boots. Miguel never looked there. You're absolutely right to want them back, she nodded. It's part of you, your creativity, your soul on paper. She spoke as if my scribbles actually mattered, like I wasn't just messing around but doing something real, something meaningful. All right, I said, finally. Let's call your policeman. But what do I say? That I left my husband because of soup? You'll say you left him after a violent incident, Zuzana replied firmly. Because that's what it was. It wasn't an accident, Miguel did it on purpose. That's abuse, Gloria. And probably not the first time. She was right. Miguel had never hurt me physically before, at least not so obviously and intentionally. But wasn't his constant criticism, humiliation, and control also abuse, just of a different kind? We called Zacharia. Zuzana did most of the talking, confidently, clearly explaining the situation, emphasizing that Miguel was unlawfully keeping my personal documents. The officer agreed to help, but only in the afternoon. Perfect, Zuzana said, hanging up. We meet him at 4 near your house. Until then, we've got time to sort out other things. What things? I asked, bewildered. Work, housing, finances, she counted off on her fingers. The foundation of your new, independent life. It sounded terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. For the first time in years, I could decide for myself how and where to live. Sure, I had almost no money, and the future was murky, but still. I have a little stash, I admitted. $100. Not much, Zuzana said with a grin. But enough to start. Listen, I have a suggestion. Remember Florence? She works at the publishing house Lyra now. The one that published your book? I asked. Exactly, Zuzana said, triumphantly raising a finger. They're looking for a proofreader. Their old lady, Maria, just retired, and there's a big workload. They're launching a new line of women's novels. The pay's not amazing, but it's enough to live on. And most importantly, the environment. You'll be surrounded by books, by creative people. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You think they'll hire me without a work record? At my age? What's wrong with your age? Zuzana bristled. You're 45, not 95. And you've worked as a proofreader before. Plus, Florence knows you personally. She remembers what a brilliant student you were. And we'll get your employment record back. It sounded almost like a fairy tale. A job at a publishing house, something I used to dream about as a student, before I got married and settled down, as Miguel used to say. What about housing? I asked cautiously. I can't live on your couch forever. And this is the next item on our list, Zuzana said, opening her laptop. Look, there's an option to rent a room not far from here. Quiet neighborhood, good public transport. The owner is an elderly retired teacher renting out a room in her 2-bedroom flat. I looked at the screen. A regular room in a regular apartment, but it would be mine. No Miguel, no Luisa, no constant tension and fear. How much? I asked, feeling that familiar tightening in my chest at the thought of the number. Zuzana named the price, and I couldn't help but gasp. It was slightly more than my entire previous salary. Expensive, Zuzana admitted, but for the capital, it's pretty standard. And if you get that job at the publishing house, you'll manage. Besides, it's just temporary, until you get on your feet. I looked at the room photos, trying to imagine myself living there. On my own, handling my own money, deciding when to come home and what to have for dinner. It felt both terrifying and incredibly appealing. Let's talk to Florence about the job first, I suggested. If the publishing house works out, then we can think about the room. Sounds sensible, Zuzana agreed, and immediately dialed the number. The conversation with Florence was short and businesslike. Old friendship was only briefly mentioned. Mostly, they discussed my work experience, skills, and possible salary. I listened to Susanna praise me, top linguist of her class, phenomenal language skills, tons of experience, and felt like a fraud. Did she really think that about me? Or was she just helping out a friend in trouble? It's set, Susanna announced after ending the call. You've got an interview tomorrow at 11. Mostly a formality, but still. Thank you. I was overwhelmed by how quickly things were happening. I don't even know what to say. You can thank me after you publish your first book, Susanna winked. Speaking of books, we've still got time before we meet the officer. Want to read mine? I'd love to hear your thoughts. She handed me her book, and I took it with something close to reverence. A real, published book by my friend, with a cover, her name on it, and a blurb on the back. I opened the first page, and the world around me disappeared. Susanna's writing style was instantly recognizable, lively, energetic, with a touch of irony. The main character, a former literature teacher named Laura, was investigating a strange incident in a small provincial town. Though the detective plot was fairly conventional, the story had depth, a keen understanding of life and human nature. I read on, forgetting the time, my problems, even the looming meeting with Miguel. Susanna tactfully didn't interrupt, working quietly on her laptop and occasionally making phone calls. Her phone rang, pulling me out of the book. Yes, Zacharia? Susanna answered. Of course, we'll be there. What, he came to you himself? Filed a report? I looked up, feeling a chill in my chest. Miguel went to the police? Why? I see, Susanna frowned as she listened. Yes, we'll come anyway, just like we agreed. She hung up and looked at me. Turns out your dear husband's not wasting time. He showed up at the station and claimed you stole family money and valuables. He's demanding a criminal case be opened. I felt the ground fall out from under me. What money, what valuables? I have nothing, just these 2,000. Of course, Susanna nodded. Zacharia didn't believe it either, but he had to accept the report, it's procedure. He says it's even more important now that we go and so you can give your side. Miguel was striking first. He knew I'd eventually come back for my documents and belongings and wanted to paint me as a thief so that the neighbors, friends, the police, everyone, would think I'd run away not because of abuse, but because I stole something. What does he want from me? I cried in despair. Why can't he just let me go? Because men like him don't let go, Susanna said firmly. They need control, power. He'll fight to the bitter end rather than admit you have the right to your own life. It sounded terrifying. I realized then that leaving Miguel was only the first step. A long, exhausting battle might be ahead. Maybe it would be easier to go back? I mumbled, panic rising. Apologize, say I overreacted. Gloria, Susanna gripped my shoulders, looking me in the eyes. Listen to me. This man poured hot soup on you. He could have seriously burned you. Today it's soup, tomorrow it's boiling water from the kettle. That's escalation. That's how abuse works. It will only get worse. Until... She didn't finish, but I understood, until something irreversible happened. Now go wash up, pull yourself together, she ordered. And put on something decent. We're going to the police, and first impressions matter. I obediently went to the bathroom, looking at my reflection. A tired woman with a dull gaze. Once pretty, but years of anxiety, sleepless nights, and constant stress had taken their toll. Wrinkles near the eyes, a bitter crease by the mouth, gray strands in my hair. Who is this? I asked myself. Is this really all that's left of the girl who dreamed of writing books? I remembered Susanna's novel and her heroine, a woman over 50 who found the strength to start a new life and career, to challenge her circumstances. A fictional story, sure. But hadn't Susanna done the same? Started fresh after her divorce? If she could do it, so can I told my reflection. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A message from Miguel: either you come home by evening or I'm filing for divorce. And forget about the apartment. You never put a cent into it. I showed Susanna the message. What a bastard, she muttered, handing the phone back. He thinks he can scare you. It won't work. What if he really files for divorce? I asked, heart sinking again. Perfect, Susanna replied. Let him file. Saves you time and money. And ignore his threats about the apartment. First, it's jointly owned property. Second, you've worked for years, that's a contribution to the family too, even if not direct mortgage payments. I wasn't so sure. The apartment, though legally in both our names, had come from Miguel's parents. They traded in the old place and paid most of the extra cost. Technically, I hadn't contributed much financially. Okay, let's leave the apartment for now, Susanna decided, seeing my hesitation. Right now, we need to get your documents and personal things. We'll deal with the rest later. So get ready, we're leaving soon. While I got ready, Susanna searched the internet, made calls, jotted down notes. I heard snippets of conversations about family law, divorce proceedings, psychological support for women in crisis. Finally, we were ready. I put on my one decent dress, a dark blue one with a collar, and my old low-heeled shoes. Susanna gave me a critical look and pulled a scarf from the closet. Here, wear this. At least it adds some color. And keep your back straight. You need to look confident. We went outside, where Zacharia was already waiting, a lean, middle-aged man with a sharp gaze and neatly trimmed mustache. He wore plain clothes, but something about his posture marked him as a law officer. Good afternoon, ladies, he nodded. Here's the plan. First, we go to the station. I'll take your statement regarding your husband's report. Then we go to your apartment for your documents and belongings. If he obstructs, we'll file a report. What if he's not home? I asked, secretly hoping for that. Then you'll have to wait or come back another day, Zacharia shrugged. Without him there or a key, we can't go in. We rode to the station in Zacharia's official car, a plain Lada with worn seats. I looked out the window at the people rushing about and thought, how many of them are like me? Women living in constant fear, staying with their husbands out of duty or habit, and how many have found the strength to break free? The station was cool and smelled like office supplies. Zacharia led us to his office, a small room with 2 desks, a computer, and a safe in the corner. On the wall hung a portrait of the president and a calendar with kittens. A funny contrast. Please, have a seat, Gloria, he said, glancing at the paperwork. I'll take your statement now regarding your husband's report. I sat down opposite him, hands folded like a model student. Susanna sat nearby, nodding supportively. Your husband claims that you left the home last night, taking with you $1,000 and expensive jewelry. What can you say to that? I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. That's not true. I have only $100, my own savings, and a few pieces of jewelry that belong to me, my mother's wedding ring, earrings from my grandmother, and a couple of inexpensive gifts. The officer made notes, nodding. Why did you leave the house? I hesitated. How do you explain 23 years of humiliation, control, and emotional pressure? How do you describe what killed you slowly, day by day? Yesterday my husband poured hot soup on me because I refused to give my bank card to his mother, I finally said. That was the last straw. I realized I couldn't live like that anymore. Zacharia looked up. Hot soup? Did you get burned? Did you go to the ER? No, I shook my head. No burns, just some redness. I rinsed it right away. I see, he wrote again. Has there been any previous physical violence? I paused. Physical? No, Miguel never hit me. He was more subtle, words, looks, silence, constant belittling. No, I admitted. But I glanced at Susanna, who nodded encouragingly. There was other abuse. He controlled all my finances, isolated me from friends and family, constantly criticized and humiliated me. Yesterday was the first time he crossed the line physically. The officer looked at me with a strange expression, some mix of sympathy and exhaustion. I understand, he said. Legally, psychological abuse is harder to prove. But as for your leaving and the alleged theft, it's clear. Your husband's report likely won't lead to anything. There's no evidence of a crime. He finished writing and handed me the statement to read. I signed it, feeling a strange relief, like I'd crossed some kind of line. For the first time, I'd officially spoken about what had been happening. Called things by their name. Now let's go to your place, Zachariah said, getting up. Hopefully your husband's home, and we can resolve this peacefully. Peacefully? After I'd left, after his police report, after his threatening message? I doubted Miguel was capable of anything peaceful now. On the way home, my anxiety grew. My heart pounded, my palms were sweaty. I looked at the familiar streets, buildings, parks, seeing them as if for the last time. I was saying goodbye to the place where I'd lived most of my adult life. There it was, our building. A typical 9-story from the late 80s. I slowed my pace, staring at the familiar windows on the 4th floor. Behind that glass and brick was a part of my life, photos, books, manuscripts, things I couldn't imagine my future without. It's okay, we'll get everything, Zuzana reassured me, noticing my hesitation. On the bench outside, 2 old ladies, Nuria and Margarita from the 2nd floor, sat watching. When they saw me with unfamiliar people, they fell silent, staring with open curiosity. Hello, I nodded, trying to stay calm. Hello, Gloria, said Nuria. We're just sitting out here getting some fresh air. Your Miguel's been home for an hour. Brought his mother too. So, Miguel wasn't at work. And Luisa was there too. A perfect setup for a scene. We climbed the stairs to the 4th floor. With every step, my heart pounded harder. What would I say to them? What would Miguel say? Would he lose control, even in front of someone else? Zachariah rang the doorbell. A long pause. Then footsteps. The door opened. Miguel stood there, unshaven, red-eyed from lack of sleep, but dressed in his best shirt, as if ready to receive guests. He glanced at us, his eyes landing on Zachariah, and his expression changed. The fake cheerfulness gave way to suspicion. Police officer, Zachariah introduced himself, flashing his badge. I'm here about the report you filed today, and to assist your wife in retrieving her personal documents and belongings. What documents? Miguel said, crossing his arms, blocking the way. She has everything with her. Miguel, the officer's voice was calm but firm. Let's not make this more difficult than it has to be. Gloria claims you're withholding her employment record book, passport, and personal belongings, including manuscripts. By law, you have no right to prevent her from retrieving them. Manuscripts? What manuscripts? Miguel snorted. That's nonsense. Miguel. I stepped forward, trying to keep my voice steady. You know what I mean. Just give me my documents and the old shoebox from the top shelf. And the photo albums with my parents' pictures. Luisa appeared behind him, small, wiry, lips tightly pursed. Well, look who finally showed up. And brought the police too. Against her own husband. What a disgrace. Luisa, Zachariah interjected, I ask that you don't escalate the situation. We're here to resolve this peacefully and within the law. Miguel hesitated. I could see it on his face. He hadn't expected me to come with the police, and with a friend as a witness. He thought I'd crawl back alone, humiliated, willing to do anything just to get my documents. Fine, come in, he muttered at last, stepping aside. But for the record, everything she's telling you is a lie. I've put up with her crap for 23 years. The apartment greeted me with familiar smells, Luisa's pastries, Miguel's cologne, pine-scented floor cleaner. I inhaled reflexively. It smelled like home. But now the scent stirred not comfort, but a vague unease. "I'll show you," I said to the officer, heading toward the hallway closet. "My documents should be in the top drawer." Miguel followed close behind, muttering about betrayal and ingratitude. Zuzana stayed beside me like a bodyguard, ready to step in. I opened the drawer. Amidst papers and documents I found my passport, health insurance card, marriage certificate. But the employment record book was missing. "It's not here," I turned to Miguel. "Where's my work record?" "No idea," he shrugged with fake indifference. "Maybe you left it at work? Or lost it during one of your meltdowns?" "Miguel," Zacharia's voice became official. "If you are hiding your spouse's documents, there could be legal consequences. I strongly advise you to return the employment book." Miguel and Luisa exchanged a glance. Quick, barely noticeable. But I knew that look. It's how they always wordlessly agreed to act in unison, against me. "You must be imagining things, officer," Miguel smirked. "I don't have any workbook." "All right," Zacharia nodded. "We'll be drafting a report. Keep in mind, if it turns up later, it will be viewed quite differently." He pulled out a form and began filling it out. "Now I want my personal belongings and the manuscripts," I said, heading toward the bedroom. "They're on the top shelf, in an old shoebox." I approached the stepladder by the wall, but Miguel got ahead of me. "I'll get it. You'll fall and then say I pushed you." He climbed up, opened the storage space, and reached inside. "No box here." "What do you mean, no box?" I went cold. It's always been there behind the suitcases. A brown shoebox from a shoe store. Then I must have tossed it when I was cleaning. We've accumulated so much junk over 20 years. Something broke inside me. My stories, my journals, my novel drafts, everything I had secretly written all these years, everything that had helped me survive. Had he really thrown them out? Or burned them? Or hidden them to blackmail me later? "You couldn't have thrown them away," I said, struggling to keep my voice from trembling. "You didn't even know they existed." "Oh, those papers you used to scribble on at night?" Miguel descended the ladder and looked me in the eyes. "I've known about them for a long time. I read them. Pathetic attempts at pretending you're a writer. You think you have talent? It's laughable." Gloria stepped forward as if to defend me, but I stopped her with a gesture. This was my battle. "Where are they, Miguel?" I asked quietly. "You know how much they mean to me." "No idea," he turned away. "Probably tossed them out with the rest of the garbage." I didn't believe him. I knew Miguel. He never threw anything away without a reason. If my manuscripts were gone, it meant he had hidden or destroyed them deliberately. But why? Out of spite? To hurt me? "Let's make a list of the belongings you intend to take," Zacharia suggested, seeing the tension rising. "And we'll note that the workbook and manuscripts have not been found." I nodded, a lump in my throat. Losing the manuscripts felt like losing a part of myself. All those thoughts, feelings, and stories I had confided only to the page. "Let's check the storage room," Zuzana offered. "Maybe he moved them there?" We searched every closet, drawer, and shelf. Nothing. Either Miguel had destroyed my writings or hidden them too well. A report was filed regarding the missing work record. I gathered the rest of my things, the photo albums, a few books with inscriptions, an old jewelry box from my mother. It all fit into a large bag that Luisa handed over in silence, clearly wanting us gone. "Can I have a moment?" I asked as we were about to leave. "I want to check one last thing." Without waiting for an answer, I walked to the kitchen and opened the cabinet above the stove. Behind a stack of cookbooks sat a small ceramic box, a gift from my first student when I taught at school. Inside were my most precious keepsakes, a lock of my mother's hair, a note from my father before he died, a brooch I wore at graduation. It was all still there. At least Miguel hadn't found or discarded it. When I returned to the hallway with the box, Miguel looked at me strangely. A mix of anger and sadness, maybe even regret. I couldn't tell. "You'll regret this," he whispered so only I could hear. "You'll live with that divorcee, bounce between rented rooms, and come crawling back. Then I'll decide whether to take you in." Once, words like that would have made me shrink in fear, seek compromise, surrender. But now, I looked at Miguel and saw only a frightened, aging man, afraid of being alone, clinging to control because he knew no other way to live. "Goodbye, Miguel," I said, looking him in the eyes. "I hope you find peace." We stepped into the stairwell. Zuzana and Zacharia walked ahead. I brought up the rear of our little procession. My heart was heavy. Losing my writings felt irreparable. And yet, I also felt a strange relief. I was saying goodbye to this home, this life, this man I had spent 23 years with. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid of the future. Outside, the officer's patrol car was waiting. Zuzana and I settled into the back seat. The bag with my belongings lay between us. "So, what now?" I asked, watching the house recede through the window. "Now your new life begins," Zuzana replied, squeezing my hand. "Tomorrow's your interview at the publishing house. Then we'll go see the room I found for you. And tonight, we celebrate your first day of freedom." I bought a bottle of good wine. The car drove through familiar streets, but they looked different, brighter, clearer, more real. As if a veil had been lifted and the world finally appeared as it truly was. That evening, sitting in Zuzana's kitchen, I told her about the lost manuscripts. "That's awful," she said sympathetically. "So much effort, so much of your soul. But maybe there's a kind of symbolism in it. A new life, new stories. You'll start writing again, and maybe it'll be even better." "You think?" I asked, unsure. "Starting over at my age?" "There you go again, at my age," Zuzana scoffed. "Gloria, you're 45. Clarissa Pinkola Estes was first published in her 50s. Britain published her debut at 40. Toni Morrison at 40. Laura Ingalls Wilder started her Little House series at 65. She was so passionate, I couldn't help but smile. "You make a strong case," I admitted. "Maybe I'll write something worthwhile again. But I still mourn the lost pages." "Of course you do," Zuzana said. "But listen, everything you've felt, everything you've been through, it's all still inside you. Maybe losing those old pages is just a sign. It's time to write a new story. Your own story." I thought about it. Maybe she was right. Maybe it was time to let go, not just of Miguel, not just of our life, but of the stories born in fear and submission. "So where do I start?" I asked, feeling a flicker of long-lost excitement. With the first word, Zuzana said simply, handing me a blank notebook and a pen. "Here. Start right now. Write about yesterday. The soup. The decision. The first step into a new life." I took the notebook, weighing it in my hands. So light, its clean pages ready for any story. My story. The soup burned instantly. I didn't even realize what happened. I began, and the words flowed freely, as if they'd been waiting years for this moment. Zuzana quietly left the room, giving me space. I wrote late into the night. And for the first time in years, I felt truly alive. The next morning began with a phone call. Groggy, I fumbled for my phone under the pillow and answered without looking. "Hello? Gloria?" "It's me." Miguel's voice was uncharacteristically quiet. "We need to talk." I sat up immediately. It was still dark outside. The clock read 6 a.m. "About what, Miguel?" "I thought we said everything yesterday." "I found your workbook," he said after a pause. "And the box with your manuscripts, too." My heart skipped a beat. So he hadn't thrown them away. There was a chance I could get them back. "I can bring them to you," he went on. "But let's meet alone. No friends, no police." His voice, so familiar, for the first time carried uncertainty. Miguel wasn't demanding, he was almost pleading. And that was so unlike him, it threw me off. Why, Miguel? Why now? I asked softly. Yesterday you acted like you knew nothing about my writings. Why the change? He was silent for a moment, then sighed. Because I'm not stupid, Gloria. I see that you're serious. That this isn't just another one of your stunts, after which you come back apologizing. You really want a divorce? Yes. I hadn't expected such a direct question. Miguel had always avoided uncomfortable topics, pretending problems didn't exist if left unspoken. Yes, I repeated, surprised by my own firmness. I want a divorce, Miguel. It's final. I see, he said bitterly. Well then, I won't stand in your way. I'll file the papers myself, if that's what you want. But can we talk? Just the two of us, no lawyers or police. That didn't sound like Miguel at all. Could he really have accepted our situation? Without drama or blame? I was suspicious. Let's meet at a cafe, I suggested, playing it safe. Somewhere public. All right, he agreed too quickly. Does 2 o'clock work for you? I have an interview at 11. I remembered my appointment with Florence. Not sure how long it'll take. Let's make it 4. At the publisher's, he sounded surprised. You already found a job? Just an interview so far, I answered cautiously. All right, he said again. 4 o'clock, then. I'll be waiting. He hung up. I sat still, staring at my phone. Something had changed. Miguel had never been so agreeable, so willing to compromise. What had happened overnight? Was it just the realization that I wouldn't come back, or something else? Who was calling this early? Zuzana peeked into the room, wrapped in a fluffy robe. Miguel, I set the phone aside. He says he found my documents. Wants to meet and hand them over. And you believe him? Zuzana raised an eyebrow skeptically. I don't know, I admitted. He seemed different. Said he'd file for divorce himself. No drama. It's suspicious. Zuzana sat on the edge of the bed. Miguel is not the kind to let go easily, as you described him. Could this be a trick? Luring you to meet him so he can pressure or threaten you. That's what I thought too, which is why I suggested meeting in a public place. But there was something in Miguel's voice, almost sincere, almost human. All right, we'll deal with that after the interview, Zuzana said, standing up. For now, up you get. We need to get you properly prepared. The coffee's almost ready. The interview at Lyra Publishing House went much better than I expected. Florence, now respectable, no-nonsense Florence, the deputy editor-in-chief, greeted me like an old friend, hugs, memories, and genuine interest in my life. She tactfully didn't ask about the reasons behind my sudden move. Zuzana must have filled her in. The publishing house office occupied 2 floors of an old mansion near the park. Despite the modern equipment and computers, the place had the ambience of an early 20th century literary salon, high ceilings, ornate molding, antique bookshelves, cozy armchairs in the corners. We have a good team, Florence said, showing me around. Mostly women, though we do have some men in the layout department and accounting. The salary's average, plus bonuses for meeting targets. Flexible hours. The main thing is to get the work done on time. Then I was introduced to the publisher, a refined woman around 60. She asked me a few professional questions, listened attentively, then nodded. Well, I see you have sufficient experience. Florence vouches for you, and she's very particular about staff. When could you start? I was taken aback. Everything was happening too fast. What about a probationary period? Paperwork? We'll prepare the documents in the next few days, the director smiled. As for the probation, of course, there will be 3 months. But you can start work as soon as tomorrow. We're in a bit of a rush with a new series. Then Monday, I offered, still trying to process the fact that I'd just been hired. A real job. At a real publishing house. Perfect, the director nodded. Florence will get you up to speed. Welcome to Lyra, Gloria. We left the office and I was finally able to exhale. Florence is just amazing, I admitted. I thought I'd have to go through dozens of interviews, proving myself. Gloria, you're a great professional, she said simply. And I've known you for ages. I know I can count on you. That's very important in our field. She lowered her voice. By the way, Susanna told me you write. Is that true? I blushed. Well, not seriously. Just dabble, now and then. Will you let me read something? Florence asked with interest. Not for publishing, just to take a look. Though, who knows, we're actually short on authors for our new women's fiction series. If your writing is good. My manuscripts are still with my husband, I stumbled, not used to calling Miguel my ex yet. He promised to return them today, though I'm not sure they're in good shape. Well, bring them when you get them. Florence patted my shoulder. Now come on, I'll show you your workspace. I walked out of the publishing house on cloud 9, a spark of hope lighting inside me. A job. A real job at a publishing house. Something I'd dreamed of since college. Even if it's just as a proofreader, not an editor, not a writer, but still among books, among creative people. I called Susanna and shared the news. I knew it, she exclaimed. Congratulations, Gloria. We have to celebrate. Come back, I've got a surprise for you. Another surprise? What now? Susanna had already done so much for me these past 2 days, I felt guilty, like I was taking advantage of her kindness and friendship. There were still a few hours before my meeting with Miguel, so I decided to head back to Susanna's to change and collect my thoughts. What would I say to him? How would I act? Just the thought of seeing him made my heart race and my palms sweat. So many years together, and now we were almost strangers. Susanna greeted me with a mysterious smile. Ready for your surprise? She asked the moment I stepped inside. Ready, but a little scared, I admitted. Your surprises have been turning my life upside down lately. In a good way, I hope, she winked and handed me a sheet of paper. Here, take a look. It was a rental listing for a small one-bedroom apartment near a metro station. The price was more than reasonable for the capital. Is this for me? I asked, not understanding where she was going with this. It's for you, she nodded. It's my aunt's apartment. She's moved in with her daughter. She used to rent it out to students, but it's currently vacant. I made arrangements. First 2 months at a reduced rate, then we'll see. Best part, it's fully furnished. Everything from bed linens to pots and pans. You can move in tomorrow if you want. I was speechless. A job, a place to live, everything was coming together so perfectly, it felt like a dream. Could it be that life was finally turning in my favor? Susanna, I don't know how to thank you, I whispered, tears welling up in my eyes. Don't be silly, she hugged me. No thanks between friends. You do the same for me. And I knew that was true. I would have done it without hesitation. I just never had the chance. Miguel would never have let me help a friend with money or a place to stay. But that's not all. Susanna stepped back and looked me in the eye. I called Guillermo. Remember the lawyer who helped me with my divorce? He agreed to consult you, for free, as a friend. He's top-notch, knows all the legal nuances. Believe me, he won't let Miguel leave you with nothing. I was stunned. So much help, so much support, from someone I hadn't seen in 2 years? What had I done to deserve such friendship? Thank you, was all I could manage, holding back tears. Thank you for everything. Hey, no crying, Susanna playfully tapped my shoulder. You've got a big day ahead. First Miguel, then we check out the apartment. By the way, do you really think he'll return your manuscripts? Or is it just a trick to get you to meet? I shrugged. I don't know. He sounded strange on the phone. Almost human. Abusers often get human when they realize the victim's slipping away, Susanna snorted. Part of the manipulation. First the carrot, then, if that doesn't work, back to the stick. I knew she was right. And yet, something in Miguel's voice made me think this time might be different. Maybe this meeting really would put an end to things, if not as friends, then at least not as enemies. I arrived at the cafe exactly at 4. Miguel was already there, sitting by the window, nervously tapping the table. In front of him sat an untouched cup of coffee and a brown shoebox. The one with my manuscripts. When he saw me, he stood up. We greeted each other awkwardly, for the first time in years, without the usual cheek kiss. I sat down across from him, trying not to show how nervous I was. "How are you?" Miguel asked, and there was something in his voice that sounded like genuine concern. "Fine," I replied, guarded. "Better than I expected." A pause. We stared at each other like strangers, unsure how to begin. Finally, Miguel pushed the box toward me. "Here are your manuscripts." "I didn't read them, if that's what you're worried about." "But you said you did," I reminded him. "I lied," he shrugged. "I wanted to hurt you." "I'm sorry." It was so unlike Miguel to admit he was wrong, to apologize. I cautiously opened the box. Inside were my notebooks, sheets of paper with tiny handwriting, old diaries. "Everything's here, untouched." "And this too," he pulled my work record out of his jacket. It was actually in the drawer with my papers. I didn't hide it on purpose. I took the booklet, flipped through it mechanically. Strangely, I believed him. Miguel, for all his flaws, rarely lied outright. He preferred omission, deflection, but not direct lies. "Thank you," I said quietly, slipping the documents into my bag. "Don't mention it." He sipped the coffee, then winced. It must have gone cold. "Do you really want a divorce?" Just like that, no preamble. But I used to love that about him, his bluntness, his honesty. When and how had it all gone wrong? "Yes," I said, meeting his gaze. "It's final, Miguel." He nodded, like he had already known the answer. "I've filed with the local court, as required." I was surprised he knew the procedure. Miguel had never cared for legal details. "I consulted a lawyer," he said, noticing my surprise. "I want to do this properly. The divorce, the division of assets. I have a proposal." "What kind?" I asked warily. "The apartment stays with me," he began, and I tensed. "I knew it. But I'll pay you compensation. About a third of its value, considering it was originally bought with my parents' money." I stayed silent, processing the offer. It was a significant amount, enough for a small flat in the suburbs or a down payment on a mortgage. Also, Miguel added, "Furniture, appliances, take whatever you want. Except my mom's cabinet, of course." "Does your mother know about this offer?" I asked skeptically. "No," he smirked. "And she won't, until it's too late. This is my decision, Gloria. I don't want war, or filth, or court drama. Let's part ways civilly." It all sounded reasonable, more than reasonable. And yet, I still couldn't quite believe his sudden generosity. "Why, Miguel?" I asked directly. "Why such a change? Just yesterday you were threatening me, filing a report with the police, and today you're offering $3 million? What changed?" He was silent for a long time, staring out the window at the people passing by. Then he sighed. "I talked to Jose last night. Remember him? My friend from the factory lives in the suburbs." I remembered. A quiet man with sad eyes who rarely visited and spoke even less about his personal life. "His wife left him 3 years ago," Miguel continued. "Same situation, fights, threats, trying to keep her things from her. It all ended in a long court battle, a ton of money wasted on lawyers, and complete loss of contact with his kids. They don't want to see him anymore." He fell silent again, gathering his thoughts. I don't want that, Gloria. We were together for 23 years. Yes, it wasn't always smooth. Yes, I wasn't always a good husband. That admission was hard for him, I could see it. But I don't want our story to end in war. I don't want to hate you. I don't want you to hate me. There was truth in his words, and that surprised me more than anything. The Miguel I knew never admitted his faults, never compromised. What had happened to him in just 2 days? All right, I said, making my decision. I agree to your terms. 1/3 of the money, and you keep the apartment. But on one condition, everything must be made official through a notary. Of course, he nodded. I've already arranged it. Tomorrow at 10 in the morning, if that works for you? I'll send the address and a message. We talked a bit more about the formalities, how to split the accounts, where the money should go, when I'd pick up the rest of my things. It was all very businesslike, calm, emotionless. As if it wasn't a husband and wife talking, but two business partners closing a joint project. What about your mother? I asked as we were saying goodbye. How did she take the news? Miguel winced. As usual, first a meltdown, then accusations, then threats to cut me out of the will. For the first time, I didn't listen to her. We parted almost like friends. Miguel even offered to drive me, but I declined. Zuzana was waiting so we could go look at the apartment together. When I left the cafe, I found a message from an unknown number on my phone. Guillermo, attorney. Expecting you at 9 a.m. tomorrow in my office for a consultation before signing the agreement with your husband. Address. Apparently, Zuzana gave him my number. That was fine. A bit of professional advice wouldn't hurt, especially when large sums of money were involved. The apartment was exactly as I imagined it. Small, cozy, with just the essential furniture and old but sturdy plumbing. A tiny kitchen, a combined bathroom, a bedroom, a living room with a couch and a wardrobe. No luxury, but more than enough for a fresh start. Do you like it? Zuzana asked when we stepped outside. Very much, I replied sincerely. When can I move in? Even tomorrow, she smiled. I have the keys. But first, the meeting with the lawyer and with Miguel. By the way, what did he say? I told her about our conversation, the unexpected offer, the sudden change in my husband's behavior. Suspicious, Zuzana frowned. It's good, of course, but we need to check all the documents and conditions. Good thing Guillermo will be with you tomorrow. He won't let them trick you. You think Miguel is up to something? I felt a stab of worry. He seemed so sincere. I don't know, Zuzana admitted. Maybe he really did decide to end things peacefully. Or maybe it's some clever scheme. Either way, stay alert. I couldn't disagree. I'd lived with Miguel too long to trust his sudden change easily. But on the other hand, people do change in extreme situations. Maybe my leaving really shook him, made him reevaluate everything? That evening, back at Zuzana's place, I was sorting through my shoebox full of manuscripts. Everything was still there, early stories, diaries, drafts of the novel I never finished. As I reread my writing, I felt a strange sense of reunion, like I'd met an old friend I hadn't seen in years. Some lines seemed naive, others surprised me with their depth. But most importantly, I saw the real me in those texts, the woman I used to be, and maybe, could become again. You know, I said to Zuzana, setting a notebook aside, I think I'm starting to understand why this is all happening now. Why I finally found the strength to leave, not 5 or 10 years ago, but now. And why is that? She asked, looking up from her laptop. Because I've finally matured enough, I said, surprised by my own calmness. Because the soup thrown at me was just the last straw. The real reason was deeper. I finally realized, it's either save myself now, or never. Zuzana smiled and shut her laptop. You know what psychologists say? A woman doesn't leave her husband when things are bad. She leaves when she realizes they'll never get better. You realized that, Gloria. And you made the right choice. We talked long into the night about the past, the future, our plans. I told Susanna about my long-standing dream to write a novel about women of our generation, the ones who lived through the 90s, built families, raised children, and tried not to lose themselves in the process. About those who, at 45, suddenly discover that life is just beginning and the most important things still lie ahead. Write it, Susanna said simply. Start now. Don't wait for the perfect moment. It won't come. Write every day, even a little. This is your chance, Gloria. Don't waste it. I nodded, feeling that familiar spark ignite inside, the one that used to keep me up at night with my notebooks, pouring out thoughts and stories onto the page. Tomorrow would be a new day. A meeting with the lawyer, a meeting with Miguel, signing the papers. The beginning of my new, independent life. A life where, at last, I would belong to myself. And that soup thrown at me in a fit of rage? Well, it really was the final drop, the one that broke the dam of fear and doubt, setting loose the river of change.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.